Greetings and welcome again. Welcome to another episode of the Reggae Planet Radio Showcase. Inside the Reggae Planet Spotlight. Inside the Cool Game Podcast. And today we're continuing the Cool Game Podcast series. Today we're talking about the Seattle Kraken, the new team in the NHL, and the NHL Expansion Story. As you know, a few years ago, for the start of the 2017 to 2018 NHL season, another new team joined the NHL. The Las Vegas Golden Knights, and they are one of the best teams in the history of NHL expansion. They went to the 2018 Stanley Cup Finals in their first year of competition in the NHL. Yes, indeed. And now, the Seattle Kraken is scheduled to begin competing in the NHL. First game will be October 12th, 2021. So we're taking you back all the way back to the early days, to the year of 1917. That's when the Seattle Metropolitans won the Stanley Cup. Yes, indeed. Seattle is a Stanley Cup winner. Did you know that Seattle is a Stanley Cup winner? But the team was called the Metropolitans. In the early days, there was several professional hockey leagues competing for the Stanley Cup. One of them was called the National Hockey Association. Another one was called the Pacific Coast Hockey League. And that is the league where the Seattle Metropolitans was competing in. And there was also another league known as the Western Hockey League. Then, in 1917, the National Hockey Association was disbanded. It folded, and a new league was formed. The new league was known as the NHL, the National Hockey League, which would go on to become the most famous and the most dominant professional ice hockey league in all of North America. And indeed, the NHL is the number one ice hockey league in the entire world. As I explained in a previous video, in those days, the Stanley Cup was the big trophy for not just the NHL, but several hockey leagues used to compete for the Stanley Cup. They used to have their own league championships, and then the winner would compete against the winner of the NHL championships, and that's how they would decide the Stanley Cup winner. It wasn't until later on in the 1930s that the Stanley Cup championship became exclusively the NHL championship, because the Stanley Cup been established since 1893. That was before the establishment of the NHL. However, later on in 1917, in the new season of 1917 to 1918, the NHL was founded. And they started out with 4 teams: the Montreal Canadiens, as well as the Montreal Wanderers, and also the Ottawa Senators, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, indeed. However, unfortunately, in early January 1918, the Montreal Wanderers lost their home arena due to a fire. The arena was burnt down, and this caused financial problems and turmoil, and eventually the team disbanded. And then the NHL continued as a simple 3-team league for quite a few years until the mid-20s, when they started to add a few more teams, and they became a 10-team league. Yes, indeed. The 1920s saw the first major expansion of the NHL. The league expanded to 10 teams during the 1920s. 7 new teams joined the NHL during that time, such as the Montreal Maroons and the Boston Bruins, And the Pittsburgh Pirates also joined in 1925. And the New York Rangers and the Chicago Blackhawks. Both teams joined the NHL in 1926. And also the Detroit Cougars started out in 1926 and they later changed their name to the now famous Detroit Red Wings. Meanwhile in Toronto, the name of the team was changed from the Toronto Arenas to the Toronto St. Patrick's, and eventually they became known as the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Great Depression of the 1930s and the World War II times of the 1940s eventually took a toll on the league, and as a result, some teams found it very difficult to survive as a professional business during those times. The Pittsburgh Pirates became the Philadelphia Quakers in 1930, but then they folded in 1931. Those days in the Depression, it was hard to keep the NHL teams going because of money issues, poverty issues, not enough support from the audiences because those times were hard. People were jobless. A lot of poverty was going on during the Great Depression. In 1934, the Ottawa Senators became known as the St. Louis Eagles. But they only lasted until 1935. The team folded. And that was the end of the Senators for those days, up until the new time now, when the Senators would re-emerge in the NHL in later years. Yes, indeed. In 1938, the Montreal Maroons also suspended all operations, as well as the New York Americans suspended all hockey operations in 1942 due to lack of players, because in those days a lot of players were drafted into the war, so they were not there to play officially in the NHL. And teams were struggling to ice a complete team on the ice, so quite a few teams folded, and the league now was just left with 6 teams. The 6 teams which became known as the original 6. The Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Detroit Red Wings, the Boston Bruins, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the New York Rangers. These are the 6 teams that held it together for 25 years and cultivated the whole concept of the National Hockey League. They're the founding teams, you know what I mean? So today, they're known as the original 6. This is the history of the NHL Expansion, brought to you by the Cool Game Podcast series, presented by Reggae Planet Radio, inside Reggae Planet Spotlight, inside the Cool Game Podcast. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Cool Game Podcast series. Today we spoke about the NHL expansion, the early years, from 1917 to 1967. Tune in again next time, and we will continue the story, the great expansion years, from 1967 onwards to 2021. Once again, we'd like to say thank you for tuning in to the Cool Game Podcast, brought to you by the Reggae Planet Radio Showcase inside the Reggae Planet Spotlight. Tune in again next time and we will continue the story. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And press that notification bell so that you will be reminded and notified of upcoming and new Cool Game Podcast uploads. Yes, indeed.